Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for joining us and for your service. Just to make sure I understand some of the basics here. So, Director Radcliffe, you were a member of the Houthi PC small group signal chain, correct?
I was.
Yeah, and so were the Vice President, the Secretaries of State and Defense, the National Security Advisor, and Ms. Gabbard, correct?
I believe so. I don't have a list of who was invited to be on.
And so was National Political Reporter Jeffrey Goldberg, correct?
I don't know that.
Yes, you do.
I don't know Jeffrey Goldberg, and I've already testified. I don't know whether or how he was added.
Okay, well, he was a member of the signal chain, and the discussion included the Vice President's private opinion on the wisdom of proposed U.S. strikes in Yemen, correct?
I don't recall.
Vance, quote, "I think we are making a mistake. I am not sure the President is aware of how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There was a strong argument for delaying this a month." You don't recall?
I don't. As you
don't recall seeing that?
Read that. I don't.
It included the private opinions of the Secretary of Defense on the timing of strikes in Yemen, correct?
I don't recall.
Director Radcliffe, surely you prepared for this hearing today. You were part of a group of principals, senior echelons of the U.S. government, in now a widely publicized breach of sensitive information. You don't recall whether the Vice President opined on the wisdom of the strikes? That's your testimony today under oath?
In that setting, I don't recall.
Here's what Secretary Hegseth said, quote, "Waiting a few weeks or months does not fundamentally change the calculus. Two immediate risks on waiting. One, this leaks and we look indecisive. Two, Israel takes an action first or Gaza ceasefire falls apart and we don't get to start this on our own terms." Your testimony is you don't recall the Secretary of Defense sending that message or reading it?
I recall there being an exchange. I don't recall the specifics as you're reading it.
Well, let's put it this way, Director Radcliffe, a discussion by senior U.S. officials on the timing and risks of a proposed military campaign and disagreements between the President and the Vice President about U.S. plans and intentions would be of obvious interest to foreign intelligence services, would it not?
Yes.
And they were discussing the timing of sending U.S. air crews into enemy airspace where they faced an air defense threat, correct?
I'm going to, Senator, defer to the other principles that you're referring to about what the meaning and the context of what they were on.
They're talking about the timing of U.S. airstrikes, correct?
Yes.
Yes, and therefore the timing of sending U.S. air crews into hostile airspace, correct?
Yes.
And therefore the time period during which enemy air defenses could target U.S. air crews flying in enemy airspace, correct?
I don't know that.
You do know that. Let me ask this question, General Hawk. You lead America's signals intelligence collection. Would the private deliberation of foreign senior officials about the wisdom and timing of potential military action be a collection priority for you and the U.S. intelligence community?
Senator, it's our job to do indications and warning for both the plans and intentions of adversary leaders and for military commanders.
And would not information about the timing of airstrikes allow a military to pre-position or cue air defense systems to shoot down enemy aircraft?
I think, Senator, from our perspective, any advance warning is something that we certainly are trying to protect.
Yeah. Director Radcliffe, this was a huge mistake, correct?
No.
A national political...
Hold on.
No, you
Let me
hold
answer.
on. No, Director Radcliffe, I asked you a yes or no question, and now you'll hold on. A national political reporter
you can characterize it how you want.
Was made privy to sensitive information about imminent military operations against a foreign terrorist organization.
Mistake of adding a reporter,
and that wasn't a huge mistake. That wasn't a huge mistake.
Well, I think they characterize it as an embarrassment.
This is utterly unprofessional. There's been no apology. There has been no recognition of the gravity of this error. And by the way, we will get the full transcript of this chain, and your testimony will be measured carefully against its content. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the witnesses again for their appearance today. I sense the Vice Chairman has something to add.
I do.
So I will recognize him briefly.
Well, again, I thank the witnesses. But what you're saying doesn't make sense on the face of it. Everybody knows, at least Director Radcliffe, you had the courtesy of acknowledging you were on the chain. Director Gabbard wouldn't even touch that, even though we've got our initials. And if you want a comparison, think back to the beginning of the Ukraine war, when the United States, in concert with our then ally, the United Kingdom, declassified a lot of Putin's battle plans that allowed the Ukrainians to push back successfully on the Russian invasion. How was that? That was gone through a real process of declassification. As Senator Ossoff so clearly made the point, this information out, potentially where our adversary could reposition its defenses, in the unwillingness of the individuals on this panel who were on the chat to even apologize or acknowledging what a colossal screw-up this is, speaks volumes.
Thank you to our witnesses for your appearance. A few administrative matters. As I mentioned earlier, Senator Collins is under the weather. She regrets that she could not be here for your testimony. Senator Risch, likewise, had to preside over a hearing of the Foreign Relations Committee to include the nomination of my former governor, Mike Huckabee, a great American and a great friend of Israel, to be the next ambassador to Israel. He also regrets that he could not be here. I anticipate he may have written questions as well. I would urge you all to respond to those promptly. Now, the audience will remain seated while our witnesses and their aides depart the hearing room. The Capitol Police will ensure this occurs. I want to commend the Capitol Police and our committee security staff for running an orderly hearing today. For the benefit of members, the vote on the floor has been called. We will adjourn this open hearing and we will reconvene in closed setting at 12:40 p.m. The hearing is adjourned. Opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everybody. I want to thank all the witnesses for being here. I got to say, I've been on the committee now for 14 years, and this year's assessment is clearly one of the most complicated and challenging in my tenure on the committee. And I want to get into that in a moment, but I want to first of all address the recent story that has broken in the news. Yesterday, we stunningly learned that senior members of this administration, and according to reports, 2 of our witnesses here today were members of a group chat that discussed highly sensitive and likely classified information that supposedly even included weapons packages, targets, and timing, and included the name of an active CIA agent. Putting aside for a moment that classified information should never be discussed over an unclassified system, it's also just mind-boggling to me that all these senior folks were on this line and nobody bothered to even check. Security Hygiene 101. Who are all the names? Who are they? Well, it apparently included a journalist. And no matter how much the Secretary of Defense or others want to disparage him, this journalist had at least the ethics to not report, I think, everything he heard. Question I raise is like, everybody on this committee gets briefed on security protocols. We're told you don't make calls outside of SCIFs of this kind of classified nature. We don't know, and I'm going to ask, obviously. Director Gabbard is the executive in charge of all, keeping our secrets safe. Were these government devices? Were they personal devices? Had the devices been collected to make sure there's no malware? There's plenty of declassified information that shows that our adversaries, China and Russia, are trying to break in to encrypted systems like Signal. I can just say this, if this was the case of a military officer or an intelligence officer and they had this kind of behavior, they would be fired. I think this is one more example of the kind of sloppy, careless, incompetent behavior, particularly towards classified information, that this is not a one-off or a first-time error. Let me take a couple minutes and review some of the other reckless choices that this administration has made regarding our national security. We all recall, it seems like it wasn't that long ago, but less than 2 months ago, in the first 2 weeks, the administration canceled all U.S. foreign assistance. Now, some may say, how bad can that be? It's foreign assistance. Well, U.S. foreign assistance paid for the units in Ukraine that provide air defense to civilian cities being attacked by Russia. Foreign assistance paid for guarding camps in Syria where ISIS fighters are detained. Foreign assistance paid for programs abroad that ensure that diseases like Ebola don't come home. And until recently, it paid for the construction of a railway in Africa that would have helped given the United States much needed access to critical minerals in Congo. Now that project, China's going to try to finance it. As well, in the first 2 weeks, Director Patel, the administration fired several of our most experienced FBI agents, including the head of the Criminal Investigative Division, the head of the Intelligence Division, the head of the Counterterrorism Division, the heads of the New York, Washington, and Miami field office, all individuals who were distinctly and directly responsible for helping to keep America safe. The irony a little bit was the recently dismissed head of the Counterterrorism Division was involved in disrupting the ISIS attacks planned for Oklahoma City and Philadelphia and helped lead the effort to bring to justice the key planner of the Abbey Gate bombing in Afghanistan that killed 13 U.S. servicemen and 150 civilians. That very Abbey Gate effort was actually praised by the President in his State of the Union address. Yet the administration's response to these agents, I believe, good works and years of service, was to force these folks out. It's hard to imagine how that makes our country safer. Nor can I understand how Americans are made more secure by firing more than 300 staff at the National Nuclear Security Administration, including those responsible for overseeing the security and safety of the nuclear stockpile. Or by ousting 130 employees at CISA, the agency directly responsible for trying to take on China's Salt Typhoon attack. Again, after Salt Typhoon, I would have thought folks on that group chat might have thought twice. Or how we made safer by sacking 1,000 employees at the CDC and NIH who are actually directly working on trying to keep our country safe from disease. Or by pushing out hundreds of intelligence officers. The amazing thing is that our intelligence officers, they're not interchangeable like a Twitter coder. These intelligence officers, our country makes $20,000 to $40,000 of an investment just in getting a security clearance. Literally goes into 6 figures when you take the training involved. Can anyone tell how firing probationary individuals without any consideration for merit or expertise is an efficient use of taxpayer dollars? And just to make clear that yesterday's story in The Atlantic was not this rookie one-off, it's a pattern. And I want to acknowledge Director Radcliffe was not here in his position when this took place. But again, earlier in the administration, when a non-classified network was used, thereby exposing literally hundreds of CIA officers' identities, those folks can't go into the field now. How does that make our government more efficient? You know, again, this pattern of an amazing cavalier attitude towards classified information is reckless, sloppy, and stunning. And perhaps what troubles me most is the way the administration has decided that we can take on all of our problems by ourselves without any needs for friends or allies. I agree that we've got to put America's priorities first. But America first cannot mean America alone. The intelligence we gather to keep Americans safe depends on a lot of allies around the world who have access to sources we don't have. That sharing of information saves lives, and it's not hypothetical. We all remember because it was declassified last year when Austria worked with our community to make sure to expose a plot against Taylor Swift in Vienna. That could have killed literally hundreds of individuals. However, these relationships are not built in stone. They're not dictated by law. Things like the Five Eyes are based on trust, built on decades. But so often that trust is now breaking literally overnight. Yet suddenly, and for no reason that I can understand, the United States is starting to act like our adversaries are our friends. Voting in the UN with Russia, Belarus, and North Korea. That's a rogues gallery if I've ever heard of them. Treating our allies like adversaries, whether it's threats to take over Greenland or over the Panama Canal, destructive trade war with Canada, or literally threatening to kick Canada out of the Five Eyes. I feel our credibility is being enormously undermined with our allies, who I believe, and I think most of us on this committee, regardless of party, believes makes our country safer and stronger. But how can our allies ever trust us as the kind of partner we used to be when we, without consultation or notice, for example, stop sharing information to Ukraine in its war for survival against Russia? Or how can our allies not only not trust our government, but potentially not our businesses with such arbitrary political decisions? Let me give you a few examples. You know, as a result of a lot of work from this committee and others in Congress, we made sure America's commercial space industry is second to none. From space to launch to commercial sensing and communications, the United States has taken a record lead. Yet overnight, this administration called into question the reliability of American commercial tech industry when Maxar and other commercial space companies were directed to stop sharing intelligence with Ukraine. I got to tell you, I've been a business guy, I can't say longer than being an elected official, but pretty close. That shockwave across all of commercial space, and frankly, not just commercial space, I've heard it from some of our hyperscalers in the tech community, has sent an enormous chill. Who's going to hire an American commercial space company, government or foreign business, with the ability to have that taken down so arbitrarily? And it's not just in the case of commercial space. We've seen that Canada, Germany, Portugal have all been saying they're rethinking buying F-35s. I've heard from Microsoft and Google directly and Amazon that they're having questions about whether they can still sell their services. We've also seen foreign adversaries and friends take advantage of this rift in our national security areas and our scientists. Germany has already put out ads trying to attract some of our best scientists who've been rifted. And the Chinese intelligence agencies are posting on social media sites in the hopes of luring individuals with that national security clearance who've been pushed out, perhaps arbitrarily, to come into their service. So no, the Signal fiasco is not a one-off. It is unfortunately a pattern we're seeing too often repeated. I fear that we feel the erosion of trust from our workplace, from our companies, and from our allies and partners can't be put back in the bottle overnight. Make no mistake, these actions make America less safe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before I turn to the witnesses hearing, I want to welcome everyone in our large audience today. I also want to note that we will not tolerate any disruptions of the